when it starts recording. And there we go. Good afternoon. We're here in the Career Center virtually. I'm Camille Cono, and today we're interviewing an Assistant District Attorney in Suffolk County, Ms. Stephanie Tuorto. And she's kind enough to spend some time with us, and we're going to be discussing her career path, how she started out in law, what it was like in college, making decisions about where to go, who she wanted to be, her adventures playing lacrosse, being a lacrosse coach, and the challenges and exciting parts of what she does now. I don't know a whole lot about being an attorney, so I'm interested in finding that out. But as we all know right now, we're all facing challenging times, and she's here to share her perspective. Maybe if you were considering becoming a lawyer, because it always sounds like a really cool thing to be, you might learn a few tips that may help you in these uncertain times. So with that, I turn it over to Ms. Tuorto.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. It's an honor to speak to students because I feel like sometimes I just was one, and now I'm here in this spot. But just a little background on me. I was born and raised in Kings Park, so not far from Hauppauge. And I graduated from Kings Park High School in 2007. And I was a big lacrosse player, so I went on to play Division I lacrosse at Quinnipiac University. And I majored in political science, and I minored in history. And I was always taught in school that the two best things that you could be were a doctor or a lawyer. That was just something that was always instilled in us in school. And I knew that being a doctor wasn't really for me, but the law always fascinated me. So I would say from a pretty early age, I come from a family of all teachers. All my brothers are teachers, my parents are teachers, but I kind of was very interested in the law and how laws affect people's lives. So when I went to Quinnipiac, I got involved in the pre-law society and anything I could get involved in. And Quinnipiac also did have a law school, so that was one of the reasons I wanted to go there as well, although I ultimately came home for law school. But I always wanted to be a lawyer, and I could really say that I did always want to be a prosecutor. I would watch Law & Order SVU like many people, and I would see Stephanie March, and my name's Stephanie, so I would always look at her, and that was just something I always wanted to aspire to be. And so after I graduated college, I took the LSAT and I got accepted to Tuorto, which is right in Central Islip and is actually across the street from where I work now at the district attorney's office and also the federal courthouse. So I started, all through law school, really, everything I did was geared towards either criminal law or becoming a prosecutor or trial attorney. And then I graduated, I did 2 internships. I interned in the Queens DA's office in the Homicide Trials Bureau, which was a very eye-opening experience. And then I also interned at the Suffolk County DA's office where I work now and the bureau that I started in. So that was a good transition because when I graduated, I took the bar exam and I started at the DA's office like 2 weeks later. So it was very quick, but also a very long process to become an attorney. And so now I'm in the Case Advisory Bureau. So I've been in the DA's office about almost 6 years in August, be 6 years. And I prosecute, basically how I explain to people what I do now is like triage for crime. So every single case that comes in that is a new arrest in Suffolk County, we review and we decide what are we going to do with this case? What bureau is it going to go to? What amount of bail are we going to be asking for? Are we going to be indicting this case, or are we going to try to engage in plea negotiations? So that's kind of what I do now. I was promoted last year, so I've been in this bureau for about a year and a half. My previous bureau, though, was handling all misdemeanors and violations, and that bureau is where every new ADA starts. And I did a lot of trials in that bureau. So that was kind of my specialty. And unfortunately, I specialize in sex crimes. So either crimes against children or sex crimes against adults. And that's something that I just was very interested in. Personally, other than murder, I feel the worst crime you can commit against another individual is a sex crime. And I felt like my skill set, I was best with working with victims of those crimes. So I did. I was very successful. I tried a lot of cases in that regard. And then I moved on now to this, we call it a Case Advisory Bureau. And then after this is now all the myriad of felony bureaus. And the Child Abuse Domestic Violence Bureau is kind of the bureau that I'm now gearing for next based on my background. So that's just a little brief background of where I came from, what I did, and where I am now.
So much information. I feel like I'm watching a TV show. I have to say, recently I started watching The Good Wife.
Okay.
So I don't know if you're familiar with that. So I'm always interested in like figuring out the investigator on there. She plays such a key role, at least in the show. And can someone be an attorney and be an investigator? Because they have so much legal knowledge. So
For sure.
I'm always here at the Career Center. I'm always looking at the regular jobs, the everyday jobs like teacher, lawyer, doctor. But for most of us, we do jobs that are behind the scenes that nobody ever knows. When I grow up, I want to be that particular thing. So wanting to hear about those other things as well. So,
Right.
so an investigator is someone who's interested perhaps in forensics because forensics is detail oriented. I know Charlie is very heavy into music. And Charlie, you want to come on and kind of introduce yourself and tell Ms. Tuorto what kind of things that you're interested in right now? And maybe she could gear some of her information towards that. What kind of classes are you taking right now, Charlie?
Hi, I'm Charles, well, Charlie. Currently, I'm taking classes like AP Music Theory, Chamber Orchestra, and like I'm also included in a bunch of different music groups like MYO and Select Strings and a bunch of other things in school and out of school.
And you've played internationally, haven't you? Did you spend a summer in Europe?
Yes, I went to Germany and we played in multiple different locations through Germany and Hungary.
Wow.
So he's well traveled.
Yeah, and I always admire people in music. I wish sometimes I think to myself, if somebody can look at a piece of music and the way their brain works and they could just play and it's beautiful. I wish I had that kind of brain. But really anything that you're doing now in high school, as long as I hate to use this word, but it really is true. As long as you're passionate about it, you could really go so far in anything that you do. I always tell people, even my players that I coach, as long as you work hard, you really can achieve anything that you set your mind to. I know it sounds cliche, but for me in my life, anytime I really set my mind to something, I'm a very motivated person and determined. I will not give up until it's done. And I feel like Charlie, if you do that with music and you've already seen the world, you've already been to places and done these things, it really could take you anywhere.
It's good to know, isn't it? And it's kind of, Charlie, it's something we've all been told since we were very young.
But it is so true. I hate to always repeat that, but it really is true. There's no substitute for hard work. And I would always say, even in lacrosse, and Charlie, for you, it'd be music and law, I may not be the smartest, I may not be the best, but nobody will outwork me. I will be the hardest worker. And I feel like when you work hard, there really is no substitute for that. So just
Good
keep doing it,
information.
Charlie. Keep hanging in there, even in these tough times, really. I feel terrible for these students, but.
Now, you said that, I mean, when you went to college, you were definitely gearing your studies to go into the legal profession. Were there some classes that were more adept to that, or how about in high school? Were there things that you were taking that you thought that would lean more or give you a stronger base when you went off to college?
So it's funny, in high school, I took Latin. Latin was available. I took Italian, but I remember taking Latin because I remember thinking that in law, a lot of phrases are Latin. And to be honest with you, I don't know if it was that helpful because it was so far removed. But I did try to see. High school was harder because there's certain classes you have to take and the electives.
Yes.
In college, in college, I knew that I was going to law school. So I definitely did. Obviously, you have to take your requirement courses. But I also thought it was important. I almost minored in philosophy. I took a lot of philosophy courses.
Wow.
And I feel like that, even though they were not law per se, I feel like they just get you thinking. And the classes that I had, the professor, he was a phenomenal professor. It wasn't about papers or tests. He would sit you in a room and have open discussions about real life issues that matter in your life, whether it be in your profession or not. And I felt like those classes were very helpful in just, what were my opinions? What were my thoughts? What do I feel about certain issues? So I felt like that was very helpful, but I did take a criminal law class that was taught by an assistant district attorney in Connecticut. Okay. And one day he had asked, we're having this mock trial competition at Berkeley College in the city, and it's on criminal law issues. And because I played lacrosse, it was kind of difficult to do other things, so to speak. Like I could never study abroad. So I asked my coach, I said, listen, I think this is something I want to do. And I think we had 2 weeks, and I ended up, it was a debate over probable cause and search and seizure issues, which is very pertinent to what I do today. And I ended up being the captain of the team, and we ended up going in, we won the whole debate, and it was a great experience. I recently found the video because they taped it the other day. I was watching it and I'm like, oh, I thought I was good then. If I only knew now, then what I knew now. But it was a good experience, and there were a lot of lawyers there watching, and it was a good affirmation because those people then came up to me and said, no, you should definitely become a lawyer. So that was just a good affirmation. It was a very good experience. And it was also nice to represent my college and be competitive. But then in law school, I really was all geared toward the DA's office. Everything I did in law school, again, you have to take your core classes, but everything I did was geared towards the DA's office. In fact, when you go to law school, anybody who's interested in going to law school, it's law review and moot court. Those are like the top 2 honor societies, very prestigious. And law review is geared towards writing, whereas moot court is geared towards arguing, but it's at an appellate level on appeal. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I'm definitely an arguer, but law review is so prestigious. So I ended up getting onto the law review, and I ended up becoming the business editor of the law review, which was considered very prestigious. And I ended up writing a case note on breathalyzers, which is, again, something I deal with in my job because we prosecute driving while intoxicated cases. And that case note ended up being published. So I feel like everything that I ended up getting involved in helped mold. And also you want to be well-rounded. You don't want to just be in one avenue. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that was very prestigious, but it was also great because it was geared towards what I wanted to do. So, but definitely, I think that I know a lot of college students don't know what they want to do, and that's okay. I just so happened to know from a very early age that I wanted to be a lawyer and a prosecutor. If I wasn't going to be a lawyer, I would have been a teacher because my whole family is teachers, and I'm a lacrosse coach now. And so that was always my fallback, but it really, it was always law for me, always to be a lawyer. And it's definitely interesting just to see the growth. And I do a lot of these speaking engagements, especially with law students and college students. And I literally feel like Charlie is sitting here. Is he a junior or?
Yes.
Junior? Yeah. So he's a junior. I feel like I was just in high school, and now, yeah, you're a junior. So I feel like I was just in your seat, and now I've been at my job almost 6 years. So time really does go so fast. But like I said, the only message I can just keep reiterating is that as long as you just stick with what you're doing and you keep working hard and you have a passion for it, of course you got to get a little lucky in some areas, but just stick with it and just keep doing what you're doing and never give up. That's what I always say. There were times where I wanted to give up, and you just can't. You just have to tell yourself that's not the type of person you are, and you got to keep forging on. So
I want to touch on something. You were bringing up Latin and philosophy, and you and I were discussing earlier before other people logged in about theater students, those students that are performing arts, they specialize in performing arts, how that is kind of interwoven in what you do.
It is. So. There are so many times, like I was telling you earlier, I had a judge when I first started. She was very into theater, and when she put that robe on and comes on the bench, it's her play. That's just, and as soon as she takes it off, she's like talking to me like I'm talking to you. But it's very theatrical, and really lawyers are actors in a sense, because when I try a case, I wasn't there for the crime that happened, and the defense attorney wasn't there either. So the only person that was there is the defendant and the victim, if there's a victim in the case, or a police officer or witness. So now I have to convince a jury of either 6 or 12 men and women of what happened when I was never there. So it becomes very theatrical, and we take a lot of training and courses on voice inflection and hand motions and using exhibits. And it's like you're presenting your case. It's very much like a play or a drama, or sometimes a comedy. Sometimes starts to do a comedy. But I would say for those people in law school, there were so many times I thought you have to major in political science. That's not the case at all. I went to law school with people who majored in everything and anything from chemistry, Spanish, French, all foreign languages, theater. I mean, there were so many different things that you don't have to pigeonhole yourself into one major. That's the good thing about law school, is that you don't need to do that. You could have majored in anything, just as long as you demonstrated that you have a good academic skill set and you obviously scored well in the LSATs. But for those theater people, they may love the trial setting. And I know a lot of people get into it because of those shows. You know, it's very much, you know, you're watching either a movie or a drama, really, but it's very, very, it really does apply to the law, especially in a trial setting.
Well, to bring it more up to date, seeing you over this video, doing this video presentation, what challenges are you finding now? Because your presentation, you're used to doing it live and in person, and the same thing for teachers and students. We're used to communicating a certain way. And I'm noticing when I go on meets, I see where people's cameras are located, if they're beneath them, if they're looking up or down. We're used to using our hands, but our hands, like my hands aren't in the image right now, you know, but I'm moving them around.
No. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. And I am a people person, so I like to engage with people. Unfortunately, because of the times, we can't do that. And like I was explaining to you earlier, you know, in my job now, on Monday, it was Memorial Day, I was in virtual arraignments. So I was arraigning defendants who were arrested either that morning or the day before, you know, over the computer. And I also recently did hearings where the defense attorneys were trying to have their clients released from jail because they claimed it was cruel and unusual punishment to be held in the jails where this virus was really a pandemic. So now I have to go on and I'm cross-examining a defendant in the jail over the computer. So it was a very unique experience. I could say that I was one of the first to do these types of hearings, but it is very difficult just because, you know, by nature, we're human beings. We want to engage with others. So it makes it difficult. However, we're lucky that we do have this technology because, you know, several years ago, we may not have been able to do any of this. So we're at least lucky that we can. We do have these mediums like Zoom and Skype and Google Meet that we are able to do it, but it's, you know, it does take away from the effect.
And with time, things are only improving. So we can hope with that. Do you think that any classes that you took in college or in grad school, law school, prepared you for this kind of transition? Do you think that taking technology classes is going to come down to what, like taking English and social studies and science, it's as important?
I think it's definitely now in this day and age. I graduated college 9 years ago. So obviously technology changes every single day, every week, every month, every year. But I think now it's especially important because everybody is using it. And I feel like sometimes I'm on the fly able to just do it, but you know, it just works. But I feel like if you're trained in it, I feel like it's very important. And I'm trying to think if I took certain classes. I remember taking one technology class that was more geared towards like Microsoft Word, Excel, things like that. But those programs are still very useful today. In fact, I have a case review later today and I use Excel. So it's important to have, you know, those skills. But I think now, especially for these students, I think it's almost essential to take those types of classes now.
Agreed. I'm having trouble doing anything with Excel because I think I need a new prescription for my eyeglasses. So the grids are like going all over the place and I can't control them, no matter how big I blow them up.
I know it's hard, and I feel like I like handwriting everything. That's just how I've always been that way. So
I have my notebook going.
Right, exactly. And I have my notes too. And sometimes it's easier to do things on the computer without a doubt. But I'm just old school. I'm taking notes, so then you have to transcribe it. But I think it's definitely important. I'm trying to think if I took, any technology classes like with the computer. I think it was just different time back then. Not that it was that long ago, but
their times are changing and quickly.
Right.
So, Charlie, do you have any questions?
Yeah, especially this pandemic highlights the need for it.
Charlie, is there anything that you've thought of while you're sitting there listening in? You could say no.
Well, the first one is a joke. The second one is more of just a general question.
Okay.
Let's hear the joke, Charlie.
Would you like to hear the joke first?
Yeah.
You have to show them the razzle dazzle.
Right.
Yes.
And second of
bring it on.
Sorry, the moment you said it's a show, I just had to say it. The second part is.
You're right.
That was the joke.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would have changed, like known, like 5 or 10 years ago? You would have known like things in advance. Would you have changed anything or done anything differently in your life for all this?
That's a very, 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 very good question. I think that there are moments in my professional life where I thought, oh, I shouldn't have done that, or, oh, I should have changed this. But again, I'm like, if I didn't do those things, I never would have learned from them, and it never would have brought me to where I am. So it's hard to say. It's an excellent question. I know, I'm trying to think of anything really noteworthy that stands out. I mean, little mistakes, but otherwise, I just feel like, again, I hate to sound cliche when I say it, but those mistakes I ended up learning from. And I feel like once I make a mistake and learn from it, I'll never make that mistake again. So it's better that I did it early on than later on in life. So
I love your optimism about what you do. And you seem very positive and well chosen the career that you've, the path that you've decided to take. What kind of challenges have you faced? Again, when I watch the TV show, I can see the disappointment in the attorney spaces, when things don't go your way. How have you learned to adapt to that, and how do you overcome that?
It's very difficult. My job is extremely stressful, and the pressure is always on. And I think in the beginning, what I struggled with is, as a prosecutor, you're constantly, we call it conferencing cases with defense attorneys, and it can become very adversarial. And as a female, and I grew up with 3 older brothers, my dad, but there's a fine line from, as a woman, from crossing that line from being, either aggressive or nasty to being firm, and confident. And I felt like I struggled with that in the beginning. And also, you have to, a good sports metaphor is leave it all on the field. These people are doing their job just like I am. So you don't want to make it personal when you get into plea negotiations. And so I kind of learned how to deal with it in like a joking manner. If we're discussing a sentence on a defendant and myself and the attorney are totally on separate ends, I would make a joke. Well, no, there's no way, because it kind of takes away from that adversarial part. But there have been many challenges. You're trying to explain to either victims or witnesses why their case is not going to go a certain way. And also disappointments in your own self. I tried my most important case to date that I've tried that I could really hang my hat on is I had a defendant who was charged with rape in the 1st degree. He was a custodian at Harbor Field School District, and he allegedly raped his 9-year-old niece. She did not say anything for many years because she was afraid it would break up her family, it would ruin everything, which it ultimately did. She ultimately tells a teacher, and teachers they have to say those things. They're mandated reporters is the word I'm looking for. So ultimately he has arrested and he was charged with a felony rape in the first degree. The Felony Bureau decided, just in a nutshell, that they didn't want to go forward with that charge because it had happened so long ago and they felt they weren't going to be able to prove it at trial. So what they did was engage in what's called a felony knockdown. And I was the person who handled all of those cases for that bureau. And so I went forward with sexual abuse, sexual misconduct, endangering the welfare of a child, a slew of charges. And the attorney, who I am very good friends with today, he wanted it dismissed. He didn't even want to talk to me about any plea or anything like that. So we ultimately went to trial. It was very nerve-wracking because I have a little girl, a senior in high school, and she testified. And I had no evidence whatsoever. I had her word, and that was really it. So I had to make a case. And again, like the theatrics, you have to make a case kind of out of nothing, but with a gut instinct that I believed her. That was the bottom line, is that you have to make those judgment calls yourself, that I really just believed her. I did not believe that she was lying. And ultimately the jury convicted. His entire family testified. It was a tumultuous trial. And the day that the verdict came in, it felt like an episode of Law and Order SVU. I was by myself at the attorney table. His attorney, who is a big shot attorney, very well respected in this county, and his whole family sitting behind him. And I have my victim and her whole family. The courtroom was packed. And will the defendant rise? Will the foreperson rise? Guilty, 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 guilty on every count. So that was, for me, I've never been hugged by more people in my life that I didn't know. But that case continued to go on after he was convicted because he appealed it, and then he appealed it again, and now he's appealing it federally. It's been affirmed on every appeal. And then I ultimately had to do what's called a sex offender registry hearing. And he was deemed a level 2 by the Department of Probation, and I was going along with that level. And because there was a different judge handling this hearing, he gave the defendant a level 1. And I was very disappointed. There are not many differences, but it was 4 years in the making that I had dealt with this case. This was just this past November. It finally came to an end. And so, like you said, a lot of disappointments. I was extremely disappointed because we went through all of these hurdles and dealt with this case all the way through. And because the judge, made a decision and I didn't agree with it, and we were arguing over it for about 2 hours, I was very disappointed in that. It really doesn't take away the fact that he was convicted, and there are very minor differences between the levels, but it was just something that I was very disappointed in. Mm-hmm. But it was that case really stands out to me in my career, and I hope to have many more of those. Unfortunately, not at the expense of these victims, but I hope to be able to help them, because at one point I really felt like I was the only person who believed her, and I really took this all on top of my shoulders. And when that verdict came in, I felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders that, these people believed her too. And that's very empowering for a victim, especially when you're that young and you don't know what's happening to you. So, but that was disappointing. We deal with a lot of disappointing decisions all the time, and you kind of just got to have a short-term memory and just keep moving on and keep going forward,
Well, bravo to you and the work that you do. That's
it's difficult, but it's such important work. And even all types of cases, there are people that, and you have to be compassionate too. I also am involved in our drug court and our mental health court programs. And even when I do the village courts, you have to be compassionate towards these people, and they're not all criminals, and you also want to try to help them. Mm-hmm. And you do have your real bad people that they need to go away. So you have to kind of see both sides. You can't be just always the firm prosecutor, and you can't always be the liberal one. You got to be somewhere in the middle. So
I have one final question. I wanted to know if there was anybody that was your role model or anybody that mentored you through your learning through this trip that you've gone through.
That's a great question. And I have to say, all throughout my schooling, I've had the best teachers ever, even at Kings Park, and then in college and in law school, and even now with attorneys and judges I look up to. I really have had the best people, luckily. And that's why I always want to try to give back, because I didn't know any lawyers in my family. They were all teachers. So I kind of had to make my own way. But the one person I really can think of was, it was my first year in law school. I was 2 weeks into school and I was taking a criminal law class, but my professor was a defense attorney. So everything he did was geared towards defense, defense, defense. And in my head, I'm like, prosecutor, prosecutor. But he had a former student of his come in and talk about jury selection. And his name was Peter Lomp, and he's currently an assistant DA in Queens. And after he was speaking, I said, I have to meet this man. I have to go meet him and talk to him. So they did have a mentor program at Tuorto. And I asked for him to be my mentor so I could be assigned to him. And he called me and said, why don't you come on a Friday to my office in Queens? And I did. And I went and he sat with me for about 4 hours, just talking to me about everything in his life and career path. And then he got me the internship at the Queens DA's office. And that summer, he was trying a homicide. And I essentially second sat him on this murder trial that ended up in an acquittal, which is very rare. It wasn't a conviction. So I got to see the real stress that he was under and the real problems in this case firsthand. I met with witnesses, I made up exhibits, and and then he ended up coming back to Tuorto as a professor. So then he taught me in my criminal trial practice my last year. And so he really helped affirm my goal of being a prosecutor. And he really kind of took me under his wing. And I believe, I came out of it and we became friends. And I'll never forget when I graduated, he gave me this clock that's still in my office now. And it said Stephanie Tuorto, Assistant District Attorney. And so I still have that. And I still keep in touch with him. And so he really, really mentored me. Now I have a lot of judges. There's a Judge Karen Kerr who's on the bench. She's the she's the head judge of all the courts in Central Islip. And she nominated me to be a part of this committee, Women in the Courts. And we talk about various issues. It's not even criminal law, just law in general. And so that's somebody that you look up to say, oh, maybe I could be in her spot one day. And so there's been so many people that have mentored me, but really I've had the best teachers, the best just people to look up to. You have to look up to people. You have to, and that's why you want to then in turn, be that role model to other people. And kind of give back in a way. But
thank you so much. Charlie, did you have another question or anything or comments before we sign off?
I'm good.
I want to try to take a picture
Thanks for
here.
coming and talking with
I
us.
could send to the DA. Oh, you're welcome, Charlie. And Charlie, Camille has my information. If you or anybody else, I know Maya was supposed to log on. We have very similar, a lot of similarities being a lacrosse player. And that's why I always say to the sports people, being a trial attorney is very much like in sports. You have the judge who's kind of the referee, the jury or your spectators, and you have the other team and me. And it's very, even in theater, the same thing. Or
and memorizing.
Any music competitions, Charlie, that you have, it would be the same thing. So.
Could I just comment? Could I just come in for a second? I find your journey very interesting, considering that my daughter is your age, went to Villanova undergrad, and went to Quinnipiac Law.
Oh, wow.
And currently lives in Connecticut and practices the other side of law, contracts, and she's a CFO of a mortgage company because she did the joint degree with the MBA. But I find your journeys very, very similar, and a lot of what you encountered really inspiring. So thank you so much for coming.
No, thank you. And thank you for saying that. And that's, you could do anything with a law degree. That's why it's so great. Look at your daughter. It sounds like she's doing, I always love hearing when people get a law degree, what they then go on to do, because there's so many things.
And she graduated from Smithtown in 2007. So, really very similar paths.
Did she go to East or West? West. Okay.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who went there, but that's nice.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, we're right next door, Kings Park.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for coming on, though. Camille, thank you for arranging this. This was amazing.
Yeah.
And Charlie, always thank you to you.
Stephanie, did you want to take a picture? I took a picture and just sent it to you, but if you want
to. Let me see. I wanted to. I know. I was told that I had to.
We're part of history now,
I know. Let me see. I put my cell phone, but.
Good.
Hooray.
Maybe Camille, you take it, or you
I took a picture and I sent it.
Oh, let me see it.
It doesn't have me, and it has you, Doreen, and Charlie. So.
Oh, good. All right.
You could just take a quick shot with your camera if you wanted of your screen. That's fine.
I'm like, they're going to yell at me if I don't take one.
I'm going to sign off only to stop the recording, but I want to thank Assistant District Attorney Stephanie Tuorto for coming and visiting with us and sharing her insight for what her path from high school to where she is presently at the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, and your contribution to making our community a safer and healthier place. Thank you so much for joining us today. And with that, I'm going to stop recording and then we could chat off.
Thank you.